Hi, and welcome back to the business of building applications. This is a mobile app course for people who are interested in the business of design and running a service. So there are several options and several chapters that we're studying. So we talked about the motivations, and now we're in part 2, which is about designing an MVP, or a minimal viable product. There are other considerations ahead of us, so if you would like to subscribe, you can see these as they come out if this is interesting to you. My name is Shad Sluter, and I am a professor of software development and computer science at Grand Canyon University. So please join us in class if this works for you. Now, what we're going to talk today about is application design in part 4. Down here at the bottom, we're focusing on MVP, which is the minimal viable product. We've already asked about which features we should include in here, what the user interface is like, and how to make a good user experience. So now what we're trying to do is come up with version 1.0 of our product that we can use to test out with users and show to investors. So that's called our MVP. So it's certainly not the most valuable player like you would see in sports, but the minimal viable product. So this term isn't my invention, of course. It comes from a book called The Lean Startup. And so you can see that it's a New York Times bestseller and a common basic idea in entrepreneur circles. So the term is defined like this. An MVP is the product that in the shortest time can create value for one or more users on a continuous basis. So some people have the idea that the MVP is like super basic and ugly and barely works, and others are saying, no, it's more of a fully functional product that we can test out. And so there's a range of ideas of what people think is MVP. So what I want to do is to show you some advice and some principles that will lead you to a successful MVP and make your business work. So we've all got a list of features that we want to put into our app, and we need to prioritize them. So the MVP are the core essential things that make our app work. The future ideas, we're going to call that version 1.1 maybe, or 2 or 3, but we're going to leave those for later after we've proven that our business concept is successful. We're going to see if users actually like what we made and if the investors can go along with us. And so the MVP is just to get us started. It's not really the full vision yet. So we've gone from prototype, which is kind of like the drawings and the wireframes, maybe something that you can actually work with, like with a clickable interface. MVP is like somewhere in the middle, and then a real product is still ahead of us. So we're in the intermediate stages now. So think MVP has limited goals and very close attention to how much it costs. Now MVP can be considered like an incremental process, or it can be considered an evolutionary process. So the first one, as far as incremental, is not an MVP. So if you were to build a truck, it is not the process of building wheels, then frame, and then a body, and then assembling it, because you really can't use the wheel by itself. Now, if you were to talk about MVP, you're going to say, we're going to build a transportation device that's going to carry cargo. Well, the first requirement is that our transportation device actually moves and can carry something. It doesn't go very fast, and it doesn't carry very much. And the bicycle is a slight improvement on that. It goes a little bit faster, and of course the motorcycle goes fast but doesn't carry much. The idea is that we have a functional product at each point of the stage of development. And so completely different than just building from the ground up and building foundation first and then building out from there. So how much does it cost to develop a scooter? Not very much. How much does it cost to build an entire truck? Obviously quite a bit. So our investment risk in the scooter stage is quite low, and that's the whole point. So if you were to build a service that does automated coffee production, you would consider an MVP like this. We want to know if the users like the idea of walking up to a machine, putting a quarter in, and getting a cup of coffee. Do people actually want that? Well, you could invent a robot to do it for you, and that would cost a lot of money. But if all you're interested in is testing out the concept, then literally you put a guy behind the cardboard, he makes the coffee and hands it through the hole. Do people like that? And you really don't know how well they like it until you test it out. So it's a physical demonstration of what an MVP looks like. So if people are having to place orders with you and you manually configure them and fulfill them, that's fine. Now, a good example of this process being manual is from the company Zappos. So in a previous video, I told you they ran an experiment to see if people would order shoes online. So that was a good question. So instead of building an entire warehouse and then running a business to answer that question, they simply put up a website that sold shoes. If somebody ordered a pair of shoes, they would take that email and it would go to the store and they would buy a pair of shoes from the retailer. And then they would put it in a box and mail it to the customer. Now, obviously, they had no markup. There was expenses in doing all of that and postage. So they were losing money in the process. But they were able to answer the question, is our minimal viable idea really viable? Will people buy shoes online? And of course, the answer turned out to be yes. And so they turned into a big investment and eventually were purchased by Amazon. And you can buy Zappos online today. Now, the idea of trying to build a MVP relates directly to the user experience. So we want to get our MVP to the top of the pyramid, but not have a great amount of money invested. So here is a way to do it wrong. This is terrible, okay? So terrible is to say, I'm going to take the strategy where I'm only going to build the easiest features, not the most important ones. And so we have a broad part at the bottom of the pyramid that says we have lots of useful things that we can do in our MVP. The experience is bad, but at least it works. So we don't want to do that. So how can we get better than terrible? Well, we could get to the level that we'll call bad. That's not terrible. So what is bad? Well, bad says we'll take a slice and we'll get a little ways up the pyramid. So we'll have maybe one or two features, they work, but we don't really have that experience of what the end goal is yet. So we can provide some value. So we want to do better than that. So let's go up one more. So from bad, we'll go to good. So good says we're going to take a narrow slice. So we'll have maybe one feature. That feature is both reliable, it's convenient, and it's very pleasant, and the experience will be good for that one thing. So the answer to the question is, which features capture the most value for the customer? And so it doesn't do much, but it does one thing very well. Now we can even do better than one step above this. We go from good to best. So best is we'll just skew the development a little bit so that maybe we'll have not two features, but one feature. That one feature is very good. It looks nice. The user experience was thought out and a user can use the product. So they would like to have more features, of course, but the answer to the question is, which features best demonstrate the value of my product? And we make sure that that experience looks really, really good. And so we want to make sure that we can answer that question. That's the point of an MVP. So let's put it into writing here. So the MVP answers the burning question is, how will users receive your product? This is really a mystery until they actually have it in their hands and they can test it out. So do they yawn at your product? If they say this is really nothing special or it's boring, then you fail fast. And you might just decide at this point, not worth it. The investors flee. We abandon the idea. Bad idea. Nobody likes it. Or we could say that the users come back with a mixed kind of a review. They say, it's a nice app, but I would prefer it if it were slightly different. If so, then we know we have a roadmap for version 2.0. Or if we hit it right and we have a great experience and the users are excited, then we roll and we can start adding development, advertising the thing, marketing, and new features are in the future. So implicit in this discussion is the idea of keeping the costs low. So your MVP has a relationship to its cost based on the number of features you put in. So keep that slice small, one good feature, and the cost of development is lower. So instead of spending $100 an hour for your developers, for each developer, to create features that are really not critical, then you keep those out. So there's an inverse, also a relationship to the amount of acceptance and understanding that your users are giving you. So they have a limited bandwidth of what they can give you for feedback. So fewer features means you get the right feedback from your users. So their understanding of what your app does is better when there's not as many choices. So lower cost and more accurate feedback on the burning question. So really the question is, what features should be in our MVP? Answer that with 3 questions. Does the user need it? How simple is it to develop? And does it provide value to the company? And of course, we want those answers to be positive, and then we know which features are in the MVP. Now, does the user need it? That's our first question. Obviously, you have the core idea, so don't try to chase down things that are nice to haves. So then the next question is, what does it cost to develop? So not only do you have to calculate the cost of your computers and the time that you pay for your developers, but you think of the opportunity cost. You want to get this business started. And so if you don't answer the question right, then you're probably going to be losing in on opportunities that you could be working on. Now, the last question is, does it provide value to the business? So the first value you can think of is revenue. So one luxury you do have is that you can postpone the development of the revenue part until later, because the goal is to find out if users like it and then get them hooked on it. And so don't annoy them with your ads. Just see if they like the feature first. Now, double check. When you get to this point in your development and you have an MVP, you've presented it to users and they've given you feedback, ask yourself, am I developing anything that is truly unique? This is a double check. Do my users see it as a differentiated product? Do I think that it's going to be an improvement? Where are we going with this? That's the double check point. Now also keep track of your backlog, because everyone's got these features that they are anxious to put in. We know that we're going to promise the people that they're going to be there, and that's what your backlog does. So version 2 is going to have numbers 4, 5, and 6, and version 3 is going to have all the great things in the future. But we're not going to invest money in those until we know that features number 1, 2, and 3 are the ones that users will actually adopt. And so it allows the users to see the future, and the developers can build something that they can adapt and extend and plan for in other versions. So now you got your MVP in place, you've tested it with a few users, and you can answer the question truthfully now, is this a good idea? Not only do I think it's a good idea, but do other people like it, and will it sell? And so that is really the one goal that you have for an MVP, is to test your idea and see if it's going to launch. Now in the next video, we're going to talk about monetizing and marketing your app. How do you get people to adopt it and use it, and how can you pay for it? If you'd like to see that, click the video that's up here on the screen. Also, I have the link to the entire playlist so you can see all of the subjects of the business of building applications. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.